Warning! The following video features custom and fabrication work performed either by a professional or under the supervision of professionals. Alright, finally we're getting to it. I got a tube bender, I got some tube, and we're finally going to finish up that roll cage in this thing. So before we get started, we need to figure out this tube bender a little bit. We're going to make our first cheater bend that we're going to use to calculate the rest of our angles in the car. So let's get to it. And because this is going to be my cheater bar, I'm just going to use this whole piece as a reference for future bends. I'm just going to notate the starting point of the bend, and in this case I'm going to use 3 inches, and then we're just going to mark it on the tube. So that's going to be our reference point. I got the clamp tightened up, and the only thing we can do now is level the bar out and start bending. Alright, now that we're zeroed out, we'll see what this thing can do. Alright, so that looks like 90 degrees. We're going to take this thing out of the bender and see how the actual bend looks. Okay, here's our first bend out of the bender. This is just our 90-degree cheater bend. Now, I just marked out where I put this in the clamp so I can use this for future reference when I go measuring the tube that I need to cut, where I'm going to start my bend at in relation to the machine itself. So this is it. Now we're going to walk this over to the car and we can start taking our measurements. So just to recap, so about a year or 2 ago, I did the actual roll bar in here, and it comes all the way around, and I didn't have the tube bender to finish the rest of the cage. So now that is all in there, it's not fully welded yet, because I'm going to come back and do that all at once. But as you can see, it drops right in. It is on the cage boxes, which are just not complete yet. And I have down bars go into the frame, which also triangulates into the shock towers on the rear end of it. So now we're going to move on to putting the rest of it in. Alright, so finally the geometry class back from high school is finally starting to pay off. What I went through and did, I know my tube's going to go down perpendicular to the ground. I come across with this magnetic angle finder, and I found that this first angle is 40 degrees. Then we're going to come up here, and I found out to straighten this angle out is 25 degrees, so it's going to give me back to horizontal. What we needed to figure out was the angle of offset, so when it comes off of that angle, you can see how it'll go straight and go into the sunroof, and that won't work at all. So we need to rotate this in the machine at an angle of 35 degrees to bring it back along the window line. I'll go inside and we'll start taking our measurements and using the cheater bender to figure out where we're going to go. I guess I should explain my dashboard situation. So here it is. This is what the car came with. It was originally, or someone previously wrapped it with this pleather skin, which is fine. However, it is lifting and the foam is separating everywhere, and it previously cut out for a cage. So I don't think I'm going to ever use this thing because it's peeling up all the way around. What I may end up doing is just ripping all this sheathing off of here, and I'm going to wrap it in carbon fiber and make a carbon fiber kind of a shell out of it. Also, the part that comes around here is also broken off. But in the meantime, I'm going to put this in the car to help me gather where I'm going to run my upper bars for the cage. Okay, so the dashboard is in for reference, and this is my cheater bar I had slid in the previously made hole for through the dashboard. So you can see I have my gauge hanging here, and what I'm looking for is to get it to 90 degrees, which you probably can't see, but that's where it's showing. Now that I have my 90 degrees, I'm going to mark where my actual bend needs to start, which is going to be right there. And from here, all we need to do have to measure down from that line to where we're going to contact frame rail. I'm just going to add a bit of extra material. So this is showing 15 inches. So when I transfer this to my actual tube I'm going to bend, it's going to be 15 inches. I'm going to mark where I'm going to start my bend, make this first bend of which was 40 degrees. So we'll make note of that. Okay, on to the second measurement. We're using the cheater bend again. I'm going to come up here and find out just where exactly this is going to need to sit. This is where my bend is going to start, so I'm going to indicate that. So this looks like it's going to fit right in here. There's a nice little pocket in here I can put this tube in. I'm going to indicate where my clamp bend is going to start, which is right there. And then we're going to measure from this line to my initial bend, so we'll know how much space we need in between them. So in this case, 33 inches between start of bend and start of bend, and we're going to worry about the third bend later. All right, now it's time to transfer those measurements onto this tube. Alright, so I've leveled my table in both directions. So I know my table plane is good. This bender sits at an angle, but when you straighten it out, it does zero out. So all we're going to do now is start our first bend, which is indicated on my car 40 degrees, but we're going to go just shy of that because I can always bend it just more if I need to. Now we're looking at my first bend. I actually increased it to 50 degrees, so it did match up to the frame well, or the A-pillar. So now my next point is I got myself all chalked up in here ready for the next bend. Now the other thing I need to worry about is angle of offset. Now I was over here trying to figure it out this way because it does need to go at that 35-degree angle I mentioned earlier, and I wasn't trusting it. So right now I zeroed this thing out, and I made this very basic little clamp. Flat stock. I meant to use a worm clamp, but I couldn't find it. So that just clamps onto the pipe itself, gives you a platform for your angle finder, which is coming out to zero when you look at it dead on. Now what I want to do is give me the 35-degree angle of offset. So now we're just going to rotate the pipe. Watch that dial change to 35. That is 35. Nothing left to do now but start the next bend. Okay, here we go with bend number 2. I already have my angle of offset already predetermined. So I take this off. That's 0. I'll read it from the other side. Okay, so I took the first tube out of the machine, just kind of roughed it up against the outside of the frame, and it looks like it comes up a little high there, and I need to attack this angle next because it needs to go down and tie into that part of the cage. So that extra length is just because it's on the outside, and it will go further in, and I'm probably going to have to cut about an inch off the bottom of that, but it will fit into place, so we're going to try and figure out that angle now. Alright, before I start my last bend, things are getting a little confusing just by looking at it in this upside down bender. So there's what we're looking at, it comes up, and what I'm working at now is making that last bend inward to tie into the main hoop. So this helps my brain by positioning it this way. I've got the jack tightened up in there so the tube will not twist anymore. I'm going to flip it back upright and we're going to put our 20-degree bend in there. Okay, this is the last bend before we start trimming. Okay, trimmed up and in the car. Just sitting on the frame rail before the boxes. Comes up at a good angle and actually tucks in really well. And here's where it meets the actual main hoop. I feel like I did a really good job meeting that up. So which brings me to, let me just show you a little trick on how I notch my tubes. Alright, tube notching. Let's say you're in a pinch and you don't have a fancy contour device. Basically, it comes up with different pins and lets you know the different points that you need to cut your tube to. And you're in the garage and you need something to help you do that. This is all you need. This is just a post-it note. It does a lot of things. It sticks itself to there, and it will keep any line you need to make actually true, as long as you line up those lines when you come around. Now that's all there is to that. We leave it there. So now let's say we're going to come in with a different size. This is a piece of 2-inch DOM tubing. This is the 1.5. Let's say this is going to be the angle that we're going to do. It's kind of an odd thing. We're going to go to a larger pipe tube from a smaller diameter. And this is just the easiest way I've found to do that. So let's just assume that this is our angle. And this is where it's belonging in the car. And you have your fancy device already set up. The only thing you're going to need to do is roll it on up. And you can see where it has folded. I'm going to help it out a little bit. And then you're going to come in with your pen. I find a pen works out pretty well, or your Sharpie. And you're just going to mark all the way around where it's folding underneath the pipe, and sometimes outward. And you're just going to do that all the way around. There you are. So next step, remove this and cut your line out you made with your scissors. Now that you've done that, slide it right back onto where you got it from. And there you'll see that matches your pipe almost perfectly. Still a little bit of a kink in there, and you just come back, trim it again, mark some lines. However, once all that's said and done, roll it over your tube and you can see the exact line you're going to have to cut. So Sharpie, transfer your line over. That's done with. So there you have it. That's going to be your perfect notch contour, and it'll fit whatever angle you're working with. Alright, so I got both of my main hoops now fit in here, and this is where it's sitting on the frame rail there, and the same as on the passenger side. So the very next thing we need to do is make mounting blocks or boxes for both sides of this, and then once I get that done, I'm going to come up here and we're going to work on the windshield hoop from point A to point B. So we'll put that in there. We'll make that out of some 1/8 inch plate when we'll start with our cardboard cutouts. Alright, and just like the support boxes I made in the front, these are the existing ones I haven't messed with in quite a while. So I just need to finish boxing off the front and back half of them, and we're going to go the same process with our cardboard templating. Alright, so this is what I came up with. I'm going to seam weld down here all the way down to the frame, and where it goes diagonally here, we're going to slice this part of the box off and down, and we're going to seam weld, of course, up here and down, as well as all the way around to that corner. So I'm also going to have to break an edge in here to make that bend also. Alright, here's just a look at our cage plates put in the front. They're just sitting there, nothing's welded yet. And you can see how that had a contour to where the frame rail curved. Got an angle on there. That'll all get seam welded up. And the actual box on the back, just trimmed and have a faceplate just sitting there for now. And we're about to weld that all up in a series later. Alright, now on to the windshield bar, which is going to run easy enough, point A to point B. It surrounds the front part of the windshield. Now I have a few options. The easy route is to keep it about here, and simple 2 notches on either side. Won't have to bend it or anything. However, it leaves a lot of mushiness here. My other option is further forward. This is on the other side of the bends. Now if I were to get it here, more space to actually triangulate this and make it stronger. I was going to kind of impede my vision slightly. So I guess the next best thing to do is do this route, add a bend at the very center of it, which will push it closer to the actual roof structure. And I think that's the route we're going to go. So I'm going to measure my center. We're going to start with a 10-degree bend and see how that fits. Alright, so we're going to put this smaller bend in that windshield bar. So the first thing I got to kind of recognize is the red line that you can see down here is the center of the actual tube, and you can't just go ahead and put that over here because the bend won't start until further that way. So what I've determined from this particular bender is about every inch I get 6 degrees of bend. So to make up for that, I pushed it back 2 inches, and that's where we're going to start bending. Now that we have our simple 10-degree bend in here, we'll come back in here and look at it, see how it looks. So I have a few options. I can angle it straight up, I can angle it there, kind of bend it forward, which gives me a lot of room also. So it's pretty much what I'm looking for. That's as close as I can get it to the roof without having any extra interference. So the next thing I need to do is we're going to notch this, but I have to clock the notching, otherwise it won't rotate it correctly. So now that I have it here, I'm going to notate with a wax pen the innermost point I'm going to make my notch, which will degree it properly for me. So now we're going to bring this back to the bench and mark our notch lines in it. Alright, so I have on my cheesy 90-degree notch templates right here with my post-it note. And the line I indicated earlier is right here. This is the clocking degree. This is going to have the largest portion of the actual notch assigned to it to make it fit. So when we line these up, that is the smallest portion of the notch. This is the largest. So this is, I need to have the largest portion showing here. So we'll line this up on the edge. We're going to trace around and then we'll go to cutting. So it's now time to notch my windshield bar. Before we do that, like I said, I don't have a fancy tube notcher. So I do prefer my small in size Harbor Freight angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. And the only thing I found is this: if you use a full-size new disc, it makes it very difficult to cut these contours. So what I've been doing and making a habit of doing is saving all of my leftover pieces. I didn't quite cut it for cutting big stuff. However, when you put it in here, it makes cutting these diameter or radiuses much easier. Alright, finishing coping up this pipe to see how this fits. Can't argue with that. So we're going to unclamp this and bring it to the car. Alright, so there it is, just kind of floating around in there. It's holding itself up, but the joints are fitting good. So the next thing to do is just tack weld everything temporarily so we can start working on Alright, so here it is. I think we made some really good progress. I'm really happy with the way that machine performed, and I'm kind of happy that I kind of figured out some of its little quirks. So I ran out of tube, and this is where we're going to leave off for the day. I'm going to go hit the tube store, and when I come back, we're going to work on the door bars and the gusseting. So we'll see you then. Bye.